with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Inside Sports Fantasy Football, Pop Culture Cosmos, the Lakers Fast Break, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows. And if you can, please give us that fantastic 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, if you can share, subscribe, follow, or do whatever it is that you can to help support us right here at the Inside Sports Fantasy Football, Lakers Fast Break, Game Source, Pop Culture Cosmos, of course, the great show, the Domination Sports Nation. You got to go ahead and check it out today, wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, you can go ahead and check out what we do each and every day at the Pop Culture Cosmos, or the latest stuff that's going on in the world of fantasy football at Inside Sports Fantasy Football. And if you could do all that, it is sincerely appreciated. Well, the fantasy football season is finally over for all teams, whether you had your last game on the second of last week or the last week of the season. The regular season's over. It is now time for the NFL playoffs. So if you're a part of a NFL playoffs mix or a fantasy football NFL playoffs type format, best of wishes to you. Best of luck. We'll probably go ahead and share some quick thoughts on that. Plus, we're going to go ahead and share some thoughts as well on the NFL playoffs. Who do we like? The matchups this weekend and going forward. And of course, the best players of the season in fantasy football. And here today to discuss all these topics are great guests indeed. You got to go ahead and check out S5, my fellow co-hosts in crime right here for you, the Chris and Dom Lardieri team right here for you. Chris and Dom Lardieri from Domination Sports Nation. Chris, Dom, great to have you back here. Chris, you excited for a great upcoming NFL playoff season?
I sure am. And first and foremost, thanks for having us back. It's always great to be here. Just last year, we saw this new format of the wild card. We get 2 games Saturday, 3 Sunday, and then a Monday night matchup to wrap up the whole wild card weekend with the season going a week later. I like it. It's a lot of football. I mean, you get it on 3 days as opposed to two and some primetime games. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Should be some really interesting matchups. Dom, it's been a very interesting fantasy football season. Went one way or the other. I know in our league, I went from first to ninth all the way to the championship game, and I got slaughtered there. So no excuses. Wish the better team won. Wish them best on that. But your thoughts on your fantasy football season? Was it everything that you hoped it would be?
It was not for us. I deeply regret not drafting Patrick Mahomes and the quarterback dilemma that my dad and I had to deal with during the playoffs. But honestly, think I drafted pretty well. I think we had some good teams, but the injuries are always going to get you, and not drafting well at one position can always get you as well. So it's always hit or miss for fantasy football, and this is just one of those years. I feel like it was unpredictable, and really you needed like a great player like Justin Jefferson or Austin Eckler to kind of carry your team.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Like I said, ups and downs, like you said, you wish you could go back in hindsight and change a couple things, tweaks here and there, and maybe things would have been so much different for you. Chris, you feel that same way? Always that nice armchair quarterback at the end of a fantasy football season.
Yeah, I do, and especially in our league where you beat us in the semifinals, and we started Gino over Trevor Lawrence, and then the next week Lawrence did nothing. It just everything was going right for our team. Drafting Eckler was huge, like Dom said. We picked Russell Wilson, and the fact that we even made it to the playoffs with that guy on our roster for most of the year was fairly amazing when you think about it. But yeah, at the end of the day, the draft can be a crapshoot. But as we saw, even at the quarterback position, if you find yourself a Geno Smith, don't ever give up on the waiver wire. Things can turn around throughout the year.
Absolutely. You never know what you're going to get off the waiver wire. I picked up Jared Goff off the waiver wire, and as a backup, he really had some good numbers, plus had some pretty good contributors over the course of the season. But also, drafting well helps as far as finding consistent players if they stay healthy, giving you consistent contributions. One thing I did notice that for most of the people that had those early season pickups off the waiver wire, or even during the course of the season, Chris, I really think that the problem is consistency. It was really hard for me to find any consistency off my waiver wire pickups. Yeah, I would find one that would do me great one week, but then would falter the next.
Absolutely. And I mean, as we've talked about for years on this show, tight ends are always a crapshoot unless you have an elite one. But I have to agree with you, even at wide receiver and running back this year, guy would have a huge week and then disappear for a few. Um, you look at some of these guys like Lawrence had a lot of fantasy points. I felt like he was up and down a lot. He'd have a
Yeah.
tremendous week and then do nothing the following week. And the other trend I've noticed too is, typical years, you're like, oh, you're going up against the 49ers defense, for instance, watch out. Well, that didn't seem to be the case. I feel like players did well against the excellent defenses. So a lot of the conventional wisdom got thrown out the window. But Gerald, I got to say, we got to pat ourselves on the back. We were touting Jared Goff early in the season. So good for you on following through on that.
Absolutely. Again, even though I couldn't put him in the lineup very much because I had Josh Allen, I thought still being able to go ahead and pick him up, but just as a insurance policy, he had a very strong season himself, almost 300 fantasy league points for someone who was thought of as being at the tail end of his career, and I thought that was a really good comeback year for him. But when it comes to fantasy football, we want to go ahead and talk about the standouts in fantasy football. And Dom, I think it starts with you, my friend. You hit it right on the head as far as I believe earlier when you said as far as who we didn't draft. You and I both. That I think is ending up as the fantasy football MVP for this year.
Yeah, it sure is, and I'll have to say right now, I think Austin Eckler is our fantasy MVP for sure. Drafted him. It was one of our best picks I think we ever had, and he was just such a key piece for that Chargers team. And look at all those touchdowns he had. So props to him for getting us all those points and almost giving us that win against you. I thought we had no chance until that Monday night game. I know you were very scared when that was happening.
And I didn't necessarily deserve. I got my just due in the championship game where I got slaughtered because beating you guys by 1 point with 2 1 point players on my starting lineup really didn't deserve it. So it was just like, okay, it is whatever it is. But yeah, I didn't deserve to get to. I've had a better performances per se. I've won leagues, I've lost leagues. I've like you, I've lost to a championship by 1 point in the semifinals. Then you go on to the championship, and you really would have had a good week had you fared against the champion. So I've been where you're at. So definitely feel free there. But I also want to mention Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes was the scoring leader, and it wasn't close over Josh Allen. Josh Allen was, for the first half of the year, the dominant fantasy football player, but his he faded a little bit and still finished number two. But Patrick Mahomes, Chris, seemed to be the guy that really all year long was consistent, was good, and throwing over 5,000 yards was really effective for your team.
Yeah, I mean, when you got a guy challenging Peyton Manning's all-time single-season yardage record, there's not much more you can say about that tremendous year. Dom and I wish we had drafted him. We were sitting there thinking about it. To your credit, you had Josh Allen, Gerald, and that was a backbreaker for us in that game against the Bears. He remained in as a starter, threw a touchdown, and ran for another one. And I think right there you could second guess yourself for your two 1 point players, but having that elite quarterback was the difference, and we didn't have that. I still think Allen had a great year. I know, like you said, he kind of tailed off. And then, too, we can't forget about Jalen Hurts. Had he not gotten hurt, I mean, I think he would have challenged Mahomes for the fantasy points leader this year. That was a guy, some people had talked about him, kind of emerging as a star, not only in the NFL in fantasy, but he really came on this year. So I think at the end of the day, Dom and I, doing our post-mortem, decided, enough with these draft rankings and consensus. In another league, we took Cup over Justin Jefferson. At the end of the day, I think if you got a feeling about a player, you like him, pick him. It's a heck of a lot more enjoyable to lose with guys you like that are putting up good numbers and relying on some quote unquote experts rankings.
I agree with you. Just a feel for me. I mean, for me, it's just always, and I know a little bit unorthodox. I favor quarterbacks higher up in the draft. I just think that as we saw this year with Josh Allen, he does win you games. Or if you get the right quarterback, they do win you a game. You can overcome sluggish play from other parts of your starting lineup, as I did in that semifinal game with you guys. I think that was just again something that when you have an elite quarterback, he can really make up for a lot of losses. Correct, Dom?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those two late touchdowns helped you a lot. I mean, when you got a guy like Josh Allen, where not only does he have a cannon for an arm, but just that mobility and him being able to scramble and get you those running touchdowns. I mean, he's just the package quarterback. It's great for the Bills to have him.
Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Chris and Dom Lardieri of the Domination Sports Nation, and me, Gerald Glassford, from Inside Sports Fantasy Football as well. Thanks so much for watching and listening. But before we head on out, it's the NFL playoffs. The NFL playoffs have now arrived, the real playoffs per se. So before we head on out, my friends, I want to ask you this: your thoughts first off. I know that we're obviously going to go ahead, woof, 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 take another trip to the doghouse, Chris, but let's go ahead and talk about some of the games out there. I still do not like the way the NFL schedules out and brackets out its games. It really makes sometimes no sense to me how a team 13-4, 13-4, 12-4 could be in a wild card situation. Just it seems to me that the priority of winning a division, no matter how bad your record is, Tampa Bay. It really seems that I don't think the NFL gets it right. And be that as it may, there's still some good matchups this weekend, especially the fact that it's funny because they won a division. Tampa Bay at 8-9 gets to host a wild card game, which is absolutely mind-blowingly bad to me. It just seems like it's a bowl game all over again, like we saw in the college football season. But I'm going to start with you, Dom. First off, when it comes to one of the matchups that you're looking at, let's say the Seahawks and the 49ers, because me, I think that's a really underrated matchup. I think Seahawks could go in with some momentum. 49ers with that defense and that system that allows any quarterback, probably you and I and Chris, could probably all throw for 200 yards and get some wins for them in this system because it seems like anybody can go in there and produce. Your thoughts on this matchup between the Seahawks and the 49ers?
Well, the Seahawks are barely sneaking into the playoffs. I didn't like how they were at the end of the year. I feel like Geno Smith was off his game, and this team was kind of falling apart. And your instinct was that they weren't going to make it, and maybe the Lions and Packers would get in over them. But they got some help. They're in, and this is a tough team that they're going to have to play. And I'm just going to break it down to what I saw in their Thursday night matchup against the 49ers. The 49ers just going to pound the running on them. You know, Kyle Shanahan likes to insert his dominance, then he'll set up the play action. I think Brock Purdy is going to be very calm in this game. There might be some weather issues, some rain. It might get a little muddy. It's going to get a little dirty, but I like the 49ers in this game. And I really think the 49ers are the dark horse to go to the Super Bowl. Everyone wants to talk about the Eagles, Cowboys, or even the Vikings, but I think this 49ers team is built to sustainably go through the playoffs and get to that Super Bowl. So I like them in this matchup.
Chris, any objections to that? Because it sure seems like it's setting itself up for a defensive struggle, but ultimately it's going to be an ugly win, I think, for San Francisco. Like maybe like 23-7 or 17-3. Just like, it looks like, because they're so good on the defensive end, they should give Seattle a lot of problems.
Yeah, no objections here. I think if they get a lead, they'll probably just pound the ball with McCaffrey and let the clock run out. But it also wouldn't surprise me if this turns into a blowout. Like Dom said, Geno's really been struggling down the stretch. Frankly, I think the Seahawks are lucky to be in. If Baker Mayfield could have hit an open receiver, that game's over, and we're looking at the Lions here in the wild card game. So I know Seattle's got a nice defense, good corners and everything, but the way Purdy's playing and the way they've basically played the Seahawks this year, I don't think it'll be an issue for them. It'll just be a matter of whether Shanahan takes his foot off the gas at some point.
I do want to say now that we go to Chargers and Jaguars. Again, team with the worst record or the lesser record gets the home game, which again boggles my mind. Chargers going in with some momentum, although I know a lot of people are going to still continually criticize how they handled the end of the season. Your thoughts, Chris, on this? Because again, playing your starters in that last game may come back to haunt the LA Chargers.
Absolutely idiotic. And I say this as someone who's got a vested interest in the Chargers. I got a ticket. in July on them to win the Super Bowl. I like the odds. I did it in spite of Brandon Staley, and I'm still having regrets. I don't know. I get, you want to have your guys in for a series, kind of keep them sharp, but look at what the Giants did against the Eagles. Dayball said, "We're not playing our key players. We're still going to play hard." They gave them a game. There was no need for Staley to play those guys. And look what happens. Mike Williams, who's been banged up all year, gets hurt again. Claims he's going to play, but I highly doubt he's going to be 100%. That said, I really didn't like what I saw from Jacksonville against Tennessee. Lawrence missing wide open receivers. Their defense basically having to keep them in the game against, let's face it, a third string Tennessee quarterback in Dobbs. The Chargers are the favorite there in Vegas. I think they should win this game, but yet again, Staley's game management always worries me. And if Williams is indeed out or not playing at 100%, that would worry me. Don't think Jacksonville's got a home field advantage, but they're a team with some momentum too. And Doug Peterson's won a Super Bowl as well.
Don't underestimate though Trevor Lawrence. You talked about how hot and cold he can get, and that he's been because he's still rounding into shape as someone I think that could become a really really good quarterback for years to come. Just has to find that consistency, and we saw flashes of it this year, Dom. I just think at this point you might want to say it's time for Trevor Lawrence after a couple weeks down weeks. Maybe it's time for him to turn it back up one more time.
Yeah, and my thing on this, I think last week was Jacksonville's week to get all the rust out. Yeah, you could say they had a rough game against Tennessee, but I feel like they're ready for the Chargers, and I really like them in this game, honestly. Not only Brandon Staley mismanaging games, and like you said last week, just inexcusable leaving your players in. It's a meaningless game. You've already locked up the 5 seed. The Ravens weren't doing anything, and I think Staley is just pure stupid for leaving his starters in. And look what happened. Mike Williams obviously hurt. Joey Bosa banged up, so it's going to be rough for them. I think Jacksonville is going to be loud and proud. They're ready. They haven't had a playoff game there in a while. And like you said, I think Trevor Lawrence bounces back this week. And for the Chargers, I know they have Justin Herbert. I know Mike Williams is going to be banged up, but this team tends to become one dimensional. Though they have one of the best running backs, Austin Eckler, they tend to pass a lot, get pass heavy, and that's when the offense breaks down and shuts down.
Your thoughts on that, Chris? I mean, because right now I see when it comes to the Chargers, it looks like I think for now around the table they are favored, but yeah, heading into this weekend, I know just Lawrence gives me that kind of vibe where he might actually be turning it up in the postseason, at least for a week.
Yeah, he's been definitely streaky at times, but when he's on, and
Yeah.
maybe he got those jitters out in what essentially was a playoff game against the Titans. I think this is going to be an interesting game, and I would not be shocked if Jacksonville wins. And as I alluded to earlier, if it comes down to coaching, I mean, you got two star young quarterbacks facing each other. I'll take Doug Peterson as the proverbial jockey over Staley any day. I mean, besides playing the starters, the guy who loves going for it on fourth down. I don't know if stubbornness or analytics consume his decision making process, but frankly, that worries me. So I will say NBC will probably be happy they've got themselves a good game here.
Dolphins and the Bills, and before seeing quite a bit of this all season long between the Dolphins and the Bills. The Dolphins are heading up to Buffalo. Obviously, you've heard out there the injuries and the things that have gone on as far as the quarterback position for Miami. Dom, I want to hear your thoughts on this, my friend, because it's a tall order for Miami to be heading up to Buffalo this time of the year, but also be heading up this time of the year with all the issues they've had at quarterback.
Yep, well, it looks like Skylar Thompson will be starting, and what I saw from that terrible game against the Jets, I think this game's easily a blowout. The Bills are even more motivated by Damar Hamlin. I mean, you saw him last week get 2 kickoff return touchdowns. I can't imagine what they're going to be doing in the playoffs, but yeah, another thing with the 7 seed, I mean, you have a team like this, you either had the Dolphins, Patriots, or Steelers getting in, and the NFL likes their money. They were going to add an extra playoff team, but this type of game, I don't think it's close. I think it's unwatchable, and I think we'll be getting ready to watch the Giants in the afternoon.
Yep, I hear you as well. That's a good summation. Any difference on that in opinion, Chris?
The only opinion I have is that I would have liked to seen the Steelers get in. It would have been a better game, a better story. Not that I thought they'd win, but at least they'd put up a fight and know how to play in the cold weather. This is going to be a brutal one-sided game.
I agree with you on that. but there's also going to be another cold game in Minnesota when it comes to the Giants and the Vikings. Giants heading into Minnesota face off against a very, very good Vikings team. Although as of late, it's been kind of touch and go. Obviously, we saw them with the highs of highs and lows of lows based off of what they're dealing with as far as their offense is concerned. Can we get Kirk Cousins on the same page as Jefferson and that does that high octane offense? But we've seen in this season there's been issues that you can easily shut them down when possible. I mean, we've seen where we've gone from 500 yards in offense to literally under 200 in a span of a week this later in the season. So I want to ask you, my friend, I'm going to start off with you, Chris. You as a Giants fan, how much hope do you have going into Minnesota this weekend?
I'm optimistic. They played a close game on Christmas Eve. The Giants looked like they were out of it. Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley rallied the troops, and frankly, a 61-yard field goal did them in on the last play of the game. Now, what happened there late in the game? They let Justin Jefferson get open, and that guy can turn a game around with one play. The one thing that gives me optimism as a Giants fan is their defense is back intact. They'll have in the secondary Adoree Jackson, Xavier McKinney, the defensive line's all there. They're missing some of those key components in the first go round. And then, too, I heard someone make a great point recently. We all know Kirk Cousins is not primetime Kirk, doesn't do well. Technically, someone said this will be a 4:40 Eastern game on Sunday. That's technically prime time in the Sunday window. So does Kirk shrivel up? We'll see. But good news is no weather issues with that beautiful dome stadium in Minneapolis. So at least we'll have a level playing field. But as a Giants fan, I am optimistic now. One game does not make a season, or will it really portend what the Giants will do? But I think the folks in Vegas and a lot of football experts out there think the Giants have a puncher's chance here.
So let me ask you this, Dom. You heard what your dad said in regards to this. With a poor performance, does Kirk Cousins go the way of the dodo off the Vikings? Because you've seen what happened here in Las Vegas. They just got tired of the Derek Carr act after many years and just said, it's time for us to go ahead and part ways. If Kirk Cousins doesn't take the team on a run this year, is this the end of Kirk Cousins as the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings?
It could happen, but I just can't see it. First year head coach, you have all this talent around him, a decent defense. I could see it with Derek Carr. Obviously, the Raiders being frustrated, but with the success the Vikings have had, yes, the flukiness and all those close wins, and I don't know. I just think they have the leverage to do it. They know the Giants are a good team, and I don't think they're gonna take them lightly like they did on that Christmas Eve game. So I think this is a very tight game, and yes, the Vikings are a little fluky. They've had all those close wins. They've either been blown out or they've won close, but I say in this game it's going to be tight, and I don't know who's going to be better, if it's going to be Daniel Jones or Kirk Cousins. I'm optimistic as a Giants fan, but a little worried for Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook, and we'll see whether they try to abuse Jefferson or Cook in the run game or the passing game. I think that'll be interesting to see their game plan here in this game.
Next game up on the playoff list after the Giants and Vikings is the Ravens and Bengals. I like this one, even though there is a little bit of point contention as far as Lamar Jackson is concerned. Chris, I wish Lamar Jackson was healthy going into this. I really wish he was, because this would be a lot closer matchups. Baltimore started out the season very strong, and due to Lamar Jackson's injury, it went downhill from there.
Yeah, the wheels came off fast, and I agree with you. They're a completely different team without Lamar. Uh, Given that and the fact that, in the NFL's infinite wisdom, every Week 18 game has to be a division rivalry. These two teams get to face each other for consecutive weeks. I think the Bengals just toyed with the Ravens for most of the game this past Sunday, and that's not going to happen here. Let's face it, there's a team with a chip on their shoulder after the whole coin flip fiasco came out from the NFL's new rules that they set up in the wake of the Hamlin game being canceled. So I don't think it's going to be much of a contest. Joe Burr is on fire, a man on a mission. Looks like they did not miss a beat this year, the Bengals, and they want to get back to that Super Bowl and win it. And I think this is step one here.
Last game on the list is the Monday wild card game where the Cowboys at 12-5 go into Tampa Bay with an 8-9 record to face off against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. I have a feeling this has all the makings of Jerry Jones getting very upset, even though it shouldn't be the case because Dallas as a team is substantially better on paper. But Dom, your thoughts on this, my friend, because it really just it has all the markings of Jerry Jones ripping his hair out, whatever he has left.
I've seen a lot of memes of the people saying the NFL is scripted, and it's kind of seeming like that at this point. This is clearly a scriptwriter game type here, where
Hard to argue with them, isn't it?
you have Tom Brady, 8-9 Buccaneers struggling all year. You have this Cowboys team. They didn't really play well against Washington, who had nothing to play for. That was a little alarming if I'm a Cowboys fan, but I think this game has all the makings for Tom Brady to just do something insane. And you saw that game against the Panthers; they had to win it, and Brady just went crazy. So did Mike Evans. So I'm saying Cowboy fans alone have had their playoff struggles, and I don't think it's any better to get this Tampa team, which I think somehow plays well in this game. How bad their season has been, I don't know how they play well in this game, but somehow they will.
Well, Chris, it's up to you, my friend. Last thoughts on this, because again, to me, this just seems like Dom said, the script writers have all gotten it already scripted. Tom Brady back in the playoffs with a substandard team. I don't expect this team to go anywhere near the Super Bowl and sniff out the Super Bowl, but I do expect something to happen this weekend when it comes to the Cowboys.
Yeah, central casting's weighed in. We're all ready to shoot. I think this could be very similar to the first game of the season, the first Sunday night game, where it was a defensive struggle. And I say that because Brady really hasn't played well down the stretch. The Bucks have no running game, and I don't know what's happened to Dak Prescott. He's been a mess. I mean, I think both of these teams' defenses will have to keep them in it, but I would not be surprised either way. I will say this: whoever wins this game, I don't think they're long for the playoffs. They're probably going out in week 2 against superior NFC teams that likely will remain. But I think it makes for good theater, and ESPN's happy they've got their Monday night game and crew, and we'll see what happens. Could be Brady's last hurrah, or like you said, Jerry Jones maybe getting enticed with the possibility of Sean Payton looming out there.
Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Before we head out, it's time to go ahead and head out to the driveway, head out to the yard, looking at everything out there going on at the street. But before we head out to the street, and before we head out on the crosswalk and everything there, woof, 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 we got to stop by the doghouse.
Thank you, Gerald. Look, 2 home dogs this week. Jacksonville, that line's moved to where they're only getting a point and a half. As we mentioned, Tom Brady and his Buccaneers also underdogs at home, but they're only getting 2.5. Hate to do it. They're my team, and I really don't want to. But just looking at the numbers and looking at value, the Giants at one point were getting 3.5 points. If you can find it, great. I can't seem to find it, so I'll go with what I see on the internet out of Vegas. There, Gerald, they're getting 3. I think at the very least they keep this game close. Worst case scenario, if they lose by a field goal again, like they did on Christmas Eve, at least you push, you get your ticket back. Not a heck of a lot of value there coming out of Vegas with 2 potential blowouts, and clearly the line's moving a little bit one way or the other with these home dogs. So I don't think there's a heck of a lot of sense in taking Jacksonville at a point and a half, for instance. Maybe if that were 3, I'd consider it. So this is not a sentimental pick, Gerald and Dom. This is purely numbers, all quant. Like Brandon Staley, I'm going with the analytics here, and I say take the Giants +3.
Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. If you have any questions for us on your upcoming league later this year, drafts, things of that nature, the players that you might be looking at, go ahead and hit us up. Or questions on the NFL themselves, or thoughts or comments, please go ahead and share them with us. isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. Before we head on out, Chris and Dom, it's up to you guys to go ahead and give everybody the shout out on exactly what's going on with your show, the Domination Sports Nation. So, Dom, I will let you take it away. What's going on with the Domination Sports Nation?
Yeah, it's obviously been a little while, but we're gonna have to talk about these crazy wild card games, and I'm sure my dad and I will love to recap these games and expect the unexpected with the NFL. So I'm sure it'll be entertaining, and the NBA is kind of ramping up, isn't it, Gerald? A lot of stuff happening, some unexpected teams doing very well so far, and some letdowns. So I'm sure we'll have to talk about that as well.
Absolutely. Mediocrity is king right now in the NBA. So if you're around 500, you still have a chance. I feel like it's almost like the year that Jim Carrey would tell me right now. So you're telling me there's a chance? Yes, there is in the NBA. But this weekend, it's the NFL. Chris, great to have you here. Dom, great to have you here. Any last thoughts before we head out this weekend?
Yeah, no, thanks again for having us. And wherever you get your podcast, it's Dom dash in Nation Sports Nation. One thing I'd like to add, I've talked about this with Dom, the debacle that was the college football championship game. I will say I think the Georgia Bulldogs could win the NFC South, and they'd probably put up a better fight than the Buccaneers would. That's my take for the week.
Yeah, I believe you are correct on that. They looked very dominant and destroyed TCU. I think that we will see them at the top or near the top for a very long time. Will it be Alabama next year, or will Georgia go 3 in a row? We'll find out. Will that dynasty reign supreme? We'll find out as far as college football is concerned. But this weekend, it's the NFL playoffs. We'll be back to keep you updated on what's going on in the NFL playoffs up until the Super Bowl and share some also additional thoughts on fantasy football. So again, please give us a shout out each and every time out right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.